All right, make sure you're in the right place. We're talking about healthy conflict. My name is Mindy Wells, and I am going to talk about healthy conflict as quickly as we can today. So you're in luck because I'm a speed talker. So they put me here at the end, and they told me when the music starts, we're done. So when you hear the music start out there, we have to wrap up. So if you hear it over here, give me a sign, and we'll know it's time to cut out of here. So we're going to talk about what is healthy conflict. Some people think that sounds like a oxymoron, healthy and conflict. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what is healthy conflict, why do we need to even think about this as a leader, why do we need to focus on it in our workplace, and then I'm going to give you a few tips for beginning to implement it or what to start thinking about in your workplace. Is there anybody that doesn't have any conflict at work? Because if you raise your hand, you're living in la-la land, right? There's no such thing as no conflict at work. That somebody has some kind of conflict, even if you don't know about it. So I have a firm. I practice out of Lima, Ohio. That's where I'm from originally, and have an office in Columbus and Sarasota, Florida. So I split my time as much as I can wherever the weather's the nicest, and not so much here today, unfortunately. And I've been an attorney for about 20 years. I went to school at Ohio Northern, so we've got some other polar bears here today. And I always jokingly say I put up a slide that has a picture of my dog because most people don't like lawyers, but everybody loves a fluffy dog. And so I start off by introducing Cammie. She is my law firm's director of happiness, and we're working on our therapy dog certification so we can go into hospitals and nursing homes. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about what healthy conflict is. We're going to talk about why it is important to you, your employees, and your business. Then we're going to talk about what your style, your personal style is, and you do not have to report it out to the whole world. I gave you a quiz to take with you so you can learn about your own style. And then some tips to take away with you. Can anybody relate with this? Sometimes the hardest part of your job isn't the work, it's the people. A lot of my clients, all of my clients are business owners, so that's who I work with every day. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it a million times. I just want to come in and be a chef. I just want to come in and be an architect. I just want to come in and run my business. I don't want to deal with people every day. Well, unfortunately, it just comes with the territory, right? So we have to learn how to deal with the folks, both our employees, but our clients and our business associates. So I'd like you just to take a second, and we're not going to talk about it out loud, about why did you choose to attend this session? So you had some great options on this third breakout of topics to cover. How did you end up deciding that you wanted to come talk about healthy conflict? Not what you would normally be excited about listening to on a Friday afternoon. And think about why it's important for you personally and how does it affect your team. So those are really super important. Why does it affect you? Why does it affect your team? And more importantly, why did you decide to invest your time to come listen to this topic? One of the things that is really important to know that as a leader, a manager, wherever you are in the organization, knowing how to manage conflict is an essential part of your professional tool set, your professional skills. So people are watching and looking at how you handle conflict. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't really have anything to learn, there's nothing that I need to know about managing conflict, I will tell you that how you handle conflict says a lot about you as a manager, a leader, and a person. So it does. You need this skill. You need to be able to handle conflicts in a healthy and constructive way. It's also important to your team. So take a look at these statistics. 70% of your employees think managing conflict is a very or critically important skill. So although you might not think so, your employees definitely think it's important. Right? And 54% think managers could handle them better. So there's your scorecard. Over half of your employees think you could be doing a better job. So one of the things I do is I teach in the MBA program at Capital University, and I always tell them, what's the number one reason that your employees leave your company? You. You are the number one reason. So I spent 10, 15 years in human resources and doing exit interviews. The most common answer for what could we do to keep you? Change my boss, change my supervisor. So as a manager, we are critically important to not only the success of our employees, but retaining them and making sure that they're productive. So the fact that 54% of our employees think we could do a better job at managing conflict probably tells me why many of you are here today. So a few times in today's presentation, I'm going to reference this great study that went on because they interviewed 5,000 employees specifically on the topic of conflict at work. And so a lot of the results that came out of that study I have incorporated a few places, and they wrote an entire book called Workplace Conflict and How Businesses Can Harness It to Thrive. So it's a super easy read if you're interested in it in greater detail. That's the actual cover of it. But it produces the results, but then it tells you what to do with it. So how can you use conflict to actually work to your business's advantage? So it tells you how people feel, it tells you how your behaviors contributed to them feeling that way, and what you can do to make a difference. It's a great read if you have some time. And then this is my other slide. You're not as great as you think you are on this. So they survey both employees and managers to see what the disconnect is. In other words, how do managers think they're doing versus how do your employees think you're doing? So take a look at this. 31% of managers, so a third of managers think they handle disagreements pretty well. But when you ask their staff members, only 22% of employees think that their managers are handling conflict well. So there's a gap, right? Our self-reflection on how well we're doing is a little higher than what our employees think how well we're doing. And then that next one, 23% of managers think they don't deal well with conflict. So managers, 23% said, I don't do well with conflict. And your employees go, oh no, it's twice as many of you don't do well with conflict. It's higher than we think. So your employees definitely notice, and they don't think we're as good as we think we are. So let's talk a little bit about what is conflict. It's not hard, right? We've all dealt with it at some point in our lives, so this definition should not come as any surprise. But I use it because when I say to folks, we're going to talk about conflict or healthy conflict or difficult conversations, people tend to groan because they think of it in a negative connotation, right? The fight, the battle. I usually hear, I don't get out of bed every morning thinking about who I can confront today. I don't know anybody well, my mother, I'm pretty sure, gets out of bed every morning wondering who she can confront, but I don't know very many other people that get up every morning thinking, who can I confront today? Where can I create conflict today? But it still happens. So we have in our minds that conflict is bad, it's negative, it's a fight, or it's a war. So I want to kind of reshape your thinking today to think about conflict as being diversity of opinion, creating conversation, innovation, boiling up new ideas. Conflict can actually have a lot of great benefits to it. I want to talk a little bit about those benefits. So whenever we pull a group of people together, there's always going to be different backgrounds, different perspectives, different cultures, different religions, different communication styles. It's just inevitable that we're going to have some of those that conflict. So this is just a brief list. This woman does a lot of writing specifically on conflict in the workplace, and so she just listed a few places where conflicts tend to come up with our employees specifically. I don't know if you can relate with any of these problems related to promotions, salary adjustments, how we're recognizing or rewarding our staff members, how we divvy up workloads among folks, and then also just personal space and privacy, and my personal favorite, plain old personality conflicts. I just don't like her. She doesn't fit. He doesn't get it. He doesn't fit here. All right, so let's switch now to talk a little bit about how healthy conflict can benefit our team. So I want you to just kind of set aside your negative perception of conflict as being something to be avoided, because it's not. I want you to think about how can I help develop healthy conflict for my organization, because it's actually going to help us. And here's how it helps us. Encouraging the healthy conflict lets people feel like there's trust and security. So the more people feel like they can have healthy debate, healthy dialogue, and differences of opinions, it develops trust and security. They don't feel like they have to always say the right thing or only tell you what you want to hear. Encouraging people to speak up in a respectful way develops trust and security with your team members. It also gets diverse points of views into the mix. And so we know as business leaders, we make better decisions when we consider multiple inputs. That doesn't mean everyone gets a vote on the outcome, but collecting information from a variety of different sources helps us make better decisions. So diverse inputs, diverse opinions, diverse contributions to a conversation typically help us reach a more well-rounded, well-thought-out, well-researched result. So we want to include diverse points of view. It also helps us surface potential issues. So one of the things I'm going to talk about at the end is what are some questions we can ask to kind of get this ball rolling with our team. It also builds commitment. What we know is the more we include people's perspectives, the more committed they are to our outcome. Even if they don't agree with the choice we made, they know that we gave them the chance to speak up, to encourage them to share, even if they disagreed or had conflicting opinions, but they will have greater commitment in the decision if they had the chance to at least be heard as part of the conversation. And it leads to better decisions overall because of all of those above components. So if you're like, I still don't like it, I'm still not into confrontation, I don't really want to learn healthy conflict, I want to make conflict go away. Making conflict go away, having no conflict on your team is actually a bad indicator for you. And here's why. When we don't have conflicting opinions come up, we usually rush to decisions, or we'll have groupthink. Have you ever been in an environment where one person takes over the conversation and everybody else just nods and goes along, even though you're sitting there thinking, I don't agree with a darn thing he just said, but I'm not going to speak up and say anything, everybody else is going along with it. So not encouraging people to participate lends toward groupthink. People get pushed toward an opinion of either the loudest person in the room or the bulliest or the strongest person in the room that speaks up more often. So they tend to adopt a majority opinion rather than speaking up and saying, I have a few thoughts on that, or have we considered? So one of the ways we can do better at that is encouraging people to bring up conflicting information, other points of view, what haven't I thought of? These 6 reasons here are exactly why we need to have healthy conflict, unless you want decisions to look like this. Unless you want people to just quiet and tell you only what you want to hear and go along with the pack. For most of us as leaders, that's not what we want. Tell me where the error of my thinking is. Tell me why this is going to fail. Tell me what the biggest criticism of this decision. Tell me what's going to make us look bad if we roll this out. Tell me, tell me, tell me. Let's talk about it. And so one of the other things we know is the lack of contribution or participation by diverse perspectives has a major negative impact on our employee engagement. And employee engagement is a really hot term in the human resources world right now, and it's about how involved, how engaged, how tuned in, how on the same page are our team members with our company. And so you might think, I'm not really into that human resources mumbo jumbo, employee engagement. Well, I tell you that it has a direct impact on your bottom line. So what we know about engaged employees has a direct impact on your profitability, your productivity, your turnover at your organization, and higher customer ratings. I'm hoping one of those things is important to you, if not all 4 of those things. So if one of those outcomes is important to you, engaging your employees, actively engaging your employees is critical to influencing that number. Let's see. So 85% of your employees say they deal with conflict at work. I'm surprised it's not 100%, but 85% at least reported that they have conflict at work. But look at the cost to organizations. Spending time and loss of time and productivity dealing with conflict, $359 billion annual impact to businesses because their employees are dealing with that conflict. So it's super important as organizations that we address this and develop a healthy environment for the conversation. We can definitely do better. And if you're interested in a deeper dive on this topic, this book is fantastic, Conflict Without Casualties, and it talks about how you can create the right environment for friendly conflict, or at least compassionate dialogue in the workplace. 64% of the people in the survey that he conducted said they would just compromise rather than talk about their preferred approach. So as a supervisor, are there any conversations that you avoid having because you just think, I'm not up for that battle? So I'll just avoid, I'll just give in, I'll do whatever it is that they ask because I don't want to tackle that person. I don't want them to cry, get mad, blow up, etc. So I'm really not going to go with my preferred approach. I'm going to just avoid having the conversation. So for many supervisors, conflict avoidance is one of the things they do on a regular basis because they don't want to have the confrontation with their staff members. And the end result, we're not getting the best ideas forward. We're not getting the best out of people. We don't know what the real issues are. And so it's super important, and I highly recommend that book so you can do better. Your employees say, these are the reasons for workplace conflict. No surprise, personality clashes and warring egos. So I work with a lot of lawyers and highly educated people, and egos come to work every day. And so egos are one of the major impact on your staff having conflicts at work. Stress is the second one, and heavy workloads. Can you influence any of those things for your staff members? Absolutely you can, and you should. So we tend to have this idea that if I act like it's not there, it will go away. If I don't talk about it and I don't give it time and attention, it will stop. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And so we know that we have a role to play as supervisors, managers, and leaders, but oftentimes what we choose to do creates an even worse environment or sends the wrong message. So here's the top ways that supervisors screw things up when it comes to managing conflict at work. We fail to set expectations, and what we do is we fail to tell our employees how we expect them to handle themselves and interact with each other. How many of you have an employee handbook? Okay. How many of you in your employee handbook have a code of conduct, a code of ethics, expected behaviors? How many of you have a rule about civility and respect at work? If you want people to behave like that at work, we need to communicate to them that that's a value and a priority for our organization. And having that in a code of conduct, a code of ethics, behavior, expected behavior is really important that we tell them what our expectations are of team members in our company. Sometimes we set the wrong tone. Have you ever blown a gasket at work? Sometimes we don't always set the example that we want our staff to follow, so setting the wrong tone is a way that we can go wrong. Sometimes we jump in too soon rather than allowing employees to manage the conflict or resolve the conflict themselves. Sometimes we overmanage the conflict and own it, and then probably the one I see most commonly is we turn our back on the conflict and hope that it goes away. So as an attorney, this is one of the biggest sources of frustrations for me because people will get fed up with an employee, they've done something, and by the time they call me and say, she needs to go tomorrow. Well, I can tell that you've hit your boiling point, but how have we talked to that employee all along? How have we set the expectation? How have we coached and counseled them? Well, what happens, I find out frequently is, well, I didn't talk to her about it. I didn't put it in her performance review, but I've had enough. And so not doing anything, turning our back creates a lot of problems. It makes it more difficult for me to help you get your end goal of getting that person out of your work environment when you've chosen to allow the behavior to continue without addressing it. So one of the reasons I talk about this topic is to help supervisors have these conversations so when it is time to pull the trigger, it's not a surprise to the employee. So my message to you is, please don't be an ostrich and put your head in the sand and act like these are going to go away. Incidents turns into patterns, mountains become out of molehills, and my favorite thing is this last line. If you don't say anything to people, you show it. So your employees pick up when you have an issue with them. You don't say good morning anymore, you don't make eye contact, you don't smile at them, you don't invite them to lunch. So even if you don't say anything, if you have a conflict with a staff member, if you don't say anything, you end up showing it. They pick up the vibe somehow, but they don't know what the problem is. So again, the whole point of healthy conflict is it's necessary to have a tool on how to handle this. One of my mentors told me early on in my career that if someone said or did something that needed to be addressed, you had 48 hours to talk to them about it or forever let it go. That if you didn't talk about it within the first 40 hours, it would eat you alive. It would just be this toxic tumor inside you that would just grate on your nerves. So she really said 48-hour rule. If someone says or does something that needs to be addressed, talk about it or forever let it go. So I just included a couple other pieces of quick research about the whole issue of accountability and engagement. This is what's really funny. Most of your employees want daily communication with their managers. So I don't know how often you're talking with your team members, whether it's face-to-face, phone or text, or any kind of communication. But the highest engagement comes from employees who have some kind of daily communication interaction with their supervisors. And depending on your age group, take a look at this statistic. 60% of employees would like feedback on a daily or weekly basis. If you have employees under age 30, 72% of them want it daily or weekly. So if you have a younger workforce, they really need that contact to be engaged with the organization. 75% think the feedback and that having that communication with you is valuable, but only 30% of employees say they're getting that from you. Largely when I say to supervisors, why aren't you having these conversations with your staff? I get two answers. One, they know they're doing a good job, I don't need to tell them every day. And two, I just don't want to address, it doesn't go well if they don't like what I have to say. So either they're doing a good job and they should know it, or they're not doing a great job, but I'm really not up for addressing it with them. So when I ask you why, or I ask folks, what's stopping you from having these conversations? We know it's good for the business. We know it's good for you as a manager. We know your employees want it desperately. Why are we not doing it? Most times supervisors say, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be uncomfortable. But the other thing they say is, I don't want the employee crying, lying, giving me the cold shoulder, shutting down. Do you have anybody that does that? If I talk to her, she won't talk to me the rest of the week. If I do this and that, he'll call off the rest of the week. I have to sit next to so-and-so in the church choir, and they'll just make my life exponentially harder. They'll take it out on my kid at T-ball. So people have all these reasons why they don't want to have the conversations because they fear the reaction of the other person. So let's get some tools here so you can start tackling. And on your handout, I have these upcoming tools listed out on there so that you wouldn't have to try to write really quickly. So one of your speakers already this morning talked to you about your healthy environment, right? Again, it's so important that we create this healthy environment, and that healthy environment when it comes to healthy conflict is an environment based on trust and respect. So that's our job as managers and leaders, is to create that environment that's built on trust and respect. How do we do that? We build it into our values, our rules, our policies. So I mentioned in there, if you have a civility policy, do you have a bullying policy? Do you have a retaliation policy? How do we let our folks know what our values are? Do you have a code of conduct or a code of ethics? In your orientation and onboarding of new staff, how do you communicate it to them, the environment that you're trying to establish at work? And then let's also make sure that we make it really clear that we don't tolerate these kind of behaviors. Finger pointing, that we want people's opinions, everyone's opinion matters, and you still get on board and respect the decision even if you don't win, even if you don't get things your way. So how do we incorporate those messages as we're bringing in our new staff and also continue to live it every day? So these are the keys to healthy conflict. So this is what we know is necessary to create an environment for healthy conflict at work. The conflict is there. We can choose to make it healthy or unhealthy. So it's already there. What can we do? We want to encourage honesty. Now some people might say, well, some people are brutally honest, and I'm just not really up for that. Okay? There's a way to let people share their brutal honesty. It can't attack other people. It can't be demeaning or degrading. It still has to be respectful. That's one of our core values already. Must be respectful communication. So we want to encourage honesty, but it needs to be respectful. All opinions are valid. We want to make sure that people feel like they're being heard and their opinions are valid. That doesn't mean they get their way every time. This just contributes to that healthy dialogue instead of a one-sided dialogue. We want each person to participate. How in a group setting can you encourage each person to participate? So I teach a class of students and half my students never raise their hand. How do I get everyone to participate? Some people don't want to speak in public. I'm guessing that's a bunch of you this afternoon. Are there other ways that we can engage people? We don't have to sit in the meeting and say, so let's just go around the room and every one of you tell me exactly what you think. We can solicit comments, turn them into somebody else in the office, send them in via email, write them anonymously. Some people are afraid to tell you what they really think because you might retaliate against them. So how can you collect information anonymously? I've even had some people say, well, I don't want to write it out because I think they'll try to figure out my handwriting. We have a real respect and issue, a security issue if our employees are afraid to write out their thoughts and comments because we're going to try to decipher their handwriting to go back to them and retaliate. So creating that environment where we can say to people, your opinion matters, and let me find ways that you can share your opinion without feeling threatened, or how can I make you feel more comfortable about sharing your opinions? We want those differences of opinions to be encouraged. We want healthy debate. So in law school, one of the things they teach us is why everything you say is automatically going to be picked apart by 5 other people in the class as soon as it comes out of your mouth. Why did what Ms. Wells just say fail? How will the opposing counsel attack what she just said? Where are the holes in her argument? So you have this healthy debate. We encourage people specifically to find the holes and have a discussion about why that line of reasoning fails or why that line of reasoning could be challenged. So healthy debate. We don't take personal attacks. We're not going to call people out, call them stupid, tell them their contribution is worthless or meaningless. And we want to let people know that we're all working on the same common goal. So if you can have this kind of baseline ground rules, even if you sit down with your team and say, here's our ground rules. We're going to have a team meeting as we launch this, or we design this, or we move into our new spaces, whatever it is you're doing, here are our ground rules. These are important to us. I'm going to live them, and I'm going to ask every one of you to live them as we're handling this meeting and as we go forward. So make it really clear to your team that these are important components to you. It's also important to let people know that facts matter, right? So we hear a lot about fake news, and people have really strong opinions, and if they want to bring opinions to the table, we want them to bring facts along with it. In other words, if you're going to speak up with an opinion, please come with supporting information that goes along with that, so we can duly consider that information. Right? They don't have to have research, but it can't just be, I feel like this is a dumb idea. Okay, tell me what can we consider? What brings you to that conclusion? What did you read? Who did you talk to? What are the facts? What's the data that led you to this piece of information that you want us to share and consider? And then make sure that as a leader, you're thanking and rewarding people who actually do speak up. We want to encourage the dialogue, respectful debate. And we want to recognize and thank people who are willing to do it. It's hard to speak up if you have an outlying opinion. It's hard to speak up if you don't think the manager likes what you have to say. So thank people who have the backbone and take an opportunity to speak up and say something. Constructive feedback is a gift, right? We want to tell people, we want to hear what you have to say. I may or may not always be able to act or make a decision in accordance, but I want to hear what you have to say, and I hope that when we do reach a decision, you'll be committed and respect the decision that was made. That I listen to all the contributions. So find ways to recognize and reward and thank the people who actually do speak up and say something. I think that last bullet is really important. We want people to passionately lobby for the opinions that they feel strongly about, but once the decision is made, we do need them to support and respect the final decision. You can't begrudge forever and be ticked off that you didn't get your way or you didn't win. So letting people know, we want you to have opinions, we want you to speak up and be honest, we want you to have your facts together and share with us what the basis is for your suggestion or your feedback. And at the end of the day, we want you to know that we will listen and carefully consider it, and we would like you to respect the ultimate decision that is made, even if you don't agree with it. That's an important part of having a respectful work environment. We still have the commitment to buy in at the end because we're working toward the same goal. It didn't have to be my way. They may have not done it exactly how I expected it to be done, but I can still respect the decision that was made because we're working toward the same goal. And telling people how the decision was made, what the goal and the focus was, how the contributions were considered, and the decision that was reached. So the other thing you need to do is also check yourself. So as the leader or manager, I already told you you're the number one reason that your staff leaves. You're also typically the number one reason why they won't have these conversations because they don't feel like they can with you. So I encourage you to check yourself. So ask other people to share their opinion before yours. What happens if the boss is the first person to share his or her opinion in a meeting? End of discussion, right? Nobody else pitches in after the boss already told what he or she thinks. So having the person in a position of the decision maker go ahead and tell what they think at the beginning does not encourage creative dialogue and constructive dialogue with everybody else afterwards. So asking everyone else's opinions and getting the brainstorming or the debate going without you laying you think is the fact or the decision helps keep it going. So keep yours till the end. Let other people jump in first. We want to seek dissent. How can we ask people to respectfully dissent? What could we say or do in a meeting to encourage dissent? How can you do that?
Ask them to tell me why I'm wrong.
Yeah, why am I wrong? Do any of you know someone that we might call a Debbie Downer? Yeah, does anyone ever work with one of those or have one in your family? Everything is wrong. Everything is going to fail. Everything is the stupidest thing she's ever seen. So I love in a group meeting to say, okay, for 5 minutes, or for the first, whatever, half an hour, I need every one of you to be the Debbie Downer. I want every one of you to think of every reason why this is going to fail, what the criticism is going to be from our audience, our customers, what your friends, neighbors, family are going to say, what I haven't thought of. I want everyone to give me at least one. So now we've turned everybody into the critical complainer. Because otherwise, Debbie will be happy to complain for everybody, right, and tell you that I speak for everyone because no one else feels like they can tell you. So I want everybody to be a Debbie Downer for the first 15 minutes. I want everybody to think about why this is going to fail, what the holes are we could poke in it, what's our biggest competitor going to say to not allow us to get a market share. What can we do to get all of that out on the table? How can we encourage dissenting opinions? Just open it up and ask everybody to tell me why this isn't going to work. What's wrong with my thought process? Check your own verbals and nonverbals. How can you tell if someone is open to hearing what you have to say? What's a nonverbal that gives you an indication whether someone is open? Or conversely, if they're closed? Leaning forward or leaning back. What about someone who you're talking, and I'm not taking it personally because you're doing this, but what do you do? Just kidding. That doesn't really show open to feedback, does it? Or do you know anybody that you haven't even gotten your sentence out of your mouth and they're like, but, or yes, but, or that won't work because. So check yourself. What verbals and nonverbals are you sending that are putting a damper on people contributing to the conversation? Right. So our goal is encourage dissent, encourage debate and dialogue respectfully, and how do we get out of the way of that? So watching our own verbals and nonverbals. When someone does speak up, do you grill them? Some people will say, oh, if you speak up, she then asks you 15 more questions. It's not worth it speaking up. Why do you think the people on your team won't speak up? How could you find out? If I ask you to all write down, what's the top 3 reasons why people on your team would not feel comfortable speaking up with a dissenting opinion, what would they say? What would they say about you? I'll tell you, he doesn't want to hear it. He's always right. It's her way or the highway. So what are you saying or doing that's sending that vibe? And think about that. So I give you your style under stress. So that was there was a quiz that was laying over there. These are just a handful of the first questions. So these give you an idea how you could be contributing to part of the issue of why people don't feel comfortable presenting conflicting information to you, why they don't feel comfortable having a dissenting opinion, why they don't feel comfortable having a debate or a diverse opinion. So take that quiz. At the bottom is the website. You can also take it online, and it helps score it for you. So this is your style under stress, and your staff members see this. I give you a couple of other resources at the bottom of your handout as well, that if you have difficulty having these kinds of conversations with your employees, and that's a whole other conversation, is a workshop on having difficult conversations, but there are 2 books that if you're just like, I avoid conflict because I don't have the tools to have those conversations, this is an awesome book. It's called Solving Employee Performance Problems, and it's got the 20 most common employee performance problems and bullet points for you to have the conversation. So it's like difficult conversations for dummies. So if you're one of those folks that's just like, I need to have some of these conversations with people about poor work, poor attendance, poor hygiene, lots of errors, this helps you get started. You don't have to reinvent the wheel if you're just stuck and think, I don't know how to have the conversation. And the other one that's really good too, if you just kind of need some guidance, is this one called The 1-Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. So the monkey is problems that people don't want to own, and they shift to you. So I say, hey Bob, I need you here at 9 o'clock every morning. You're rolling in at 9:15. The monkey is his attendance and tardiness. So I've said, hey, you're rolling in at 9:15. I need you here at 9 o'clock every morning. So I've said, you need to own this monkey, your attendance. The employee frequently will say, well, I have a transportation issue, I have babysitter issues, and then give you back the monkey. So these 2 books talk about how do you have the more conflicting conversations with your employees. So what I want to do is just give you a couple of quick tools. The back page of your one handout. So I've talked to you a little bit about healthy conflict, how you can start structuring your work environment to support creative conflict. And then I've given you some tools on that page on how to have some of those conversations with your staff, because usually one of the biggest sources of conflict is you don't know how to approach things with your staff members. So it's one thing to be able to create constructive dialogue within your team, but it's also you have to walk that talk with your own staff, and there's some tips in there on how to walk that talk with your own staff. So quickly summarize, conflict happens. We can't avoid it. As a manager, we have to do something. If you act like it's not there, it is not going to go away. This isn't something that will just miraculously disappear. You have to develop the skills to handle it. Doing nothing also sends a message. So if you're like, well, I'm not going to say or do anything, that also sends a message to your staff. And then I've given you the tips and some tools on how to create that culture that encourages dissent. So think about your policies, think about your meetings, think about what you can say to folks to encourage them. And then also think about your own behavior and how you're getting in the way of your staff members sharing their diverse opinions with you. So I heard someone talking, so I think it's time to let you go. If you have any questions, I'm happy to handle those for you. I'll stick around for a while. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck with your healthy conflict.